Officiating today is Rabbi Lily Goldstein.
Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Today we're here to remember Lana Segal. We acknowledge her immediate mourners, her sons, Neil and Mark, her daughters-in-law, Jessica and Carol, her granddaughters, Jenna and Hannah. We also acknowledge the many friends, community members, and BJBE choir members who have been a cherished part of Lana's life. I'd love to begin with some words from Cantor Frost, who so wishes she could be here today, but is recovering from surgery. She wrote, "I am so sorry that I cannot be with you all today, and I am so incredibly sorry for your loss. Lana was a force with which to be reckoned. As I told Mark and Neil, when God made Lana, God broke the mold. There was no one quite like her. Her quick wit, her sense of humor, her sarcasm. She was a vital part of our BJBE community and especially our choir family. It was wonderful to have her gather with us for our first choir rehearsal this past summer. Dressed to the nines, holding court with a smile on her face, proud to be there, she looked radiant. She shared with me that night how much being back at BJBE meant to her and how much she had missed being here. We will miss her voice and her presence, but Lana, you will always be with us." We begin our services with words of Psalms that connect Lana's memory to the long history and traditions of our people. We begin with Psalm 23. Adonai roi lo echsar, binot asher yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot, yanahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, Yancheni v'magleit tzedek, Yancheni v'magleit tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki eilech begeit samavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha amayanachamuni ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged zorerai Dishanta vashamen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yirtefuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim Adonai roi lo echsar. Let's read together the inside of your pamphlet, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I want to invite Neil forward to share some words that Lana herself prepared.
Thank you, Rabbi Goldstein. Okay, I'll do my best here. Well, if Neil is reading this, obviously I died. But those of you who know me well, know I would not leave this world without having the last word. First of all, to paraphrase Tom Hanks, there will be no crying at this funeral. There will be no crying at this funeral. I'd like my funeral to be a remembrance of the happy, fun, meaningful, and good times we had together with a lot of laughs. I have no regrets. I've had a good life, and I have nothing to complain about. Well, I always have something to complain about. Although I didn't have much luck with my fathers, I won the lottery with the women influences in my life. I had a beautiful mother who didn't have such a good life, but loved it with dignity and more courage than any woman I know. Set an example for me which allowed me to live a good and meaningful life. My beautiful Aunt Harriet, my co-mother, who was always there when my mother couldn't be, and gave me many years of good advice. My loving Nani, if you sat at any of my tables, her influences, she passed on her love of beautiful things, antiques, the rightness of keeping family heirlooms, and keepsakes. My grandma, Anna, who showed me a life lived with dignity, even after the loss of her 28-year-old son, my father. I had a good 44-year marriage, although we fought like cats and dogs. As Rabbi Kadar said at Jerry's funeral, that was our dance, and we made it work. We had so many wonderful trips together and good times with family and friends. Jerry had a way to keep me grounded when I'd get nutty. His favorite thing to say to me was, "Honey, do you want to win the battle or the war?" And it always worked. But the best and most meaningful thing we did together was raise two of the most incredible sons. My brilliant Mark and my extraordinary street smart son, Neil, have been outstanding gentlemen. They are honest, hardworking, loyal, caring, loving, the best husbands and fathers. They have always lived up to the good values we taught them throughout our lives. Some years ago, I don't remember if I was talking with Mark or Neil, but they said that Jerry and I always taught them good values. My answer was, you couldn't give me a greater compliment. These two young men brought me two and thoughtful daughters into my life, my Carol and my Jessica. And this fabulous four gave me the most precious gifts, my Jenna and Hannah. Now I know all of your grandchildren are wonderful and awesome, the brightest, most beautiful, talented, etc., etc., etc. But mine stand right up there at the top of yours. Sorry. These girls were raised in loving homes and became loving and caring young women, and so talented. My Jenna, when she dances or choreographs a dance, is magic, beautiful, and innovative. My Hannah brings tears to my eyes when she sings. No one sings the national anthem better than she does. They both have good jobs and are well thought of and are constantly being promoted and praised. I am blessed with my little sister, Lila, Evan, and Sherry. Evan researching, and Sherry ordering tests and procedures, which saved my life. My little sister, Lila, was my biggest cheerleader, always positive and encouraging me not to give up. For them, I will always be grateful. I've had the love and support of my Russ cousins and my wonderful Chicago and Florida friends. Too numerous to single anyone out, but you know who you are. I love you and will certainly miss you. And last, but definitely not least, my Stuart. Stuart came into my life at exactly the right time, and although we only had a couple of good and fun years together, we had an extraordinary, loving, and beautiful relationship. He was my dependable rock with every step of the way during my illness. He never missed an appointment or never missed coming every day to the hospital or Whitehall, depending on where I was. He, like Lila, cheered me on and would not give up. He lovingly took care of me during all aspects of my illness, and I know my family is grateful to him as I am. I will miss you, honey, but I know Julie and the Fortners will watch over you. Ask Stuart, and he will explain who they are. So in closing, I want to thank you all for being there for me always. I love and appreciate you, and will certainly miss you. Again, I ask you not to cry for me. Please, instead, remember me. Love, kisses, hugs, XOXOXOXOXO. P.S., by the way, don't forget to pick up your copy of the cake recipe.
All right, good morning, everyone. Everybody here in the room and everybody on the live stream. I think we're broadcasting this to lots of family and friends who couldn't be here today. I'm Lana's other son, Mark, if you don't know me. And we want to thank you all for being here to help us celebrate our mother's life and help us, Neil and I and our families and Stuart and our cousins, begin the mourning process. As Rabbi Goldstein mentioned, our mother sung in the BJB choir for probably between 40 and 50 years. We were trying to figure it out yesterday. She's been in the choir a really long time. And as Rabbi Goldstein mentioned, she actually came to visit the synagogue last fall at Cantor Frost's invitation. And as the rabbi said, she really enjoyed the visit. And she, when she got home, she called me and said, you know what? I like being there so much, I want to have my funeral service here. And so that's why we're here today. So thank you for that. So as I reflect on my mother's life, I was trying to come up with the appropriate metaphor for it. The best I could come up with was actually a restaurant, and which is not expected, but whatever. All right, those of you who live around here know there used to be a restaurant just down the road from here on Lake Cook Road called Ed DeBevick's. And if you're familiar with that place, it was like a 50s style diner. Lots of memorabilia. They probably sell lots of greasy food that's not very good for you. Burgers, chicken fried, pick your favorite meat or vegetable. That's what they sold there. 50s memorabilia on the wall. And the wait staff would actually sit at the sit at the table with you and give you a hard time. It was like part of the charm of the place. But the reason why this place reminds me of my mother is a sign that hung in that restaurant. You didn't see it when you walked in there, but you saw it when you walked out of there. And the sign that hung over the door said, "You are now leaving Ed DeBevick's and entering grim reality." It just, for some reason, that spoke to me. Why do I think that's relevant here? Because I think our mother prepared us to deal with grim reality, the grim reality of life. What does that mean? Grim reality is where bad things happen to good people, things aren't always fair, and unexpected and unpleasant things occur. As was alluded to by Neil, my mother experienced some of those things in her own life, and she tried to impart those lessons onto Neil and me. So as was mentioned, my mother's biological father died when she was about 1.5 years old. And when that happened, that's obviously traumatic when you lose a parent, no matter how old they are and how old you are, but very traumatic to a 1.5-year-old. And she watched her mother, our grandmother, Estelle, or as we called her, Bobby, because apparently as a little kid, I couldn't say Booby, so she became Bobby, watched her go through that. Bobby eventually remarried, married a man named Ed Leifer, who was very good to my mother and my grandmother. He was also somewhat of a strict parent from what we've been able to figure out. And one thing that they always pushed on my mother about, unfortunately, was her weight. That was something my mother struggled with her whole life. That's something I've struggled with my whole life. And that's something that just made an impression on her, always pushing her, can you lose some weight, can you lose some weight, can you lose some weight? She lived part of the year in Florida and part of the year in the Chicago area. And during her high school years, that was really rough on her. I mean, I think she had the best of times and the worst of times in high school. And I mean, she had pleasant memories and unpleasant memories. And interestingly, I think the pleasant outweighed the unpleasant because she actually went to just about all of her high school reunions. She always found a way to go, but those experiences were rough. Another thing that happened to our mother was her stepfather actually died very suddenly in an accident while my mother was in high school. And she watched her grandmother, or she watched our grandmother, her mother Estelle, take over the family plumbing business, which was a really difficult thing to do for a woman in the late 1950s to do that. But she did that, and she showed a lot of self-determination. She faced that grim reality and did the best she could. And I think my mother absorbed those lessons and adapted them to her own life. So after high school, she went to college at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and that's where she met our father. They got engaged while they were up there. They moved back to Chicago, and they got married. My mother once said it took her a little while to get pregnant, but eventually she did, and eventually she had me. And our mother was always an extremely protective parent, and I think that was a response to some of the grim realities that she faced. So I believe about the time I was born, a baby was stolen out of the nursery at the hospital I was born at, and that really rattled my mother. And then right after I was born, I needed a little medical procedure. They had to take me away from her. I think that rattled her some more. So as Neil and I grew up, she was extremely protective. She always wanted to know where we were at any given time. She was fixated on that. When we grew up, we went to the elementary school that was across the street from our house. She would some days sit out on the lawn chair on the driveway waiting for us to come home to make sure we got home okay. One time I was staying late after school. I was helping a teacher do something, and within 10 minutes of the end of the school day, the intercom in the room, this was before cell phones, was blaring from the office, and they're saying, Mrs. whoever the name of the teacher was, yeah, is Mark Segal there? Because my mother had called the school saying, where's Mark? He didn't come home on time. Is everything okay? What's going on? That's the way she was. We spent lots of quality time at the emergency room at Lutheran General Hospital, everything from tragic pumpkin carving accidents to collisions with tables, doors, whatever. But one time we actually had a true medical emergency, and it involved Neil. And when my mother came home from work, there was an ambulance and a fire truck parked on our driveway. And as soon as she walked into the house, she let out a yell I've never heard in my life before, because she was so protective of Neil and me. Her worries continued when we went on to college. She had us check in with her on a regular basis. This was back when long-distance telephone calls cost serious money. She didn't want us to, call collect or anything. So what we would do is we would call person to Teddy Segal. And Teddy was never available to answer the phone because Teddy was our dog. And he was never available, but that's how she kept in contact with us. As we moved into adulthood, she continued to worry about us, continued to always want to know where we were. One example, the year Carol and I started dating, we were in Chicago. We decided, hey, let's go sailing on Lake Michigan. I'd never done that before. We found a place to rent a boat in Belmont Harbor. We were out sailing Lake Michigan, having a great time. It was nice. We would rent the boat for a couple hours. You know what, let's stay out for an extra hour. It's a good day to be sailing. We got back, and we checked in with my mother. She was about 10 minutes from calling the Coast Guard to launch a search and rescue mission for us, because obviously the boat sank and we're drowning in Lake Michigan. She always worried a great deal. As Neil and I were growing up, she wanted us and demanded that we behave properly and know how to function in social situations. The reason she operated that way was she knew of the grim reality of being judged by your appearance and your behavior, and she wanted to make sure we knew how to behave properly. We used to go to dinner with our grandfather probably once a week, and if Neil or I misbehaved at the table, my mother would flash a look that would freeze a glass of water at 10 yards. And if we were in kicking distance, we would probably get a kick in the shins so she could further express her displeasure at how we were behaving at the dinner table. But she was trying to help us cope with grim reality. She helped us appreciate the arts. As long as I can remember, there was always a piano in our house, and our mother loved to play the piano. When she was waiting to go somewhere, like someone's going to pick her up to go to lunch or something, she would play the piano. She tried to instill a love of the arts in Neil and me. She tried to get me to take piano lessons, which I did, and after 3 years, the piano teacher said, "Mrs. Segal, you're wasting your money." On the other hand, Neil picked up the guitar. I don't know if you actually took lessons or you taught yourself, but Neil can actually play the guitar very well. So at least one of her children got the music bug. There was always music in our house. One thing she helped me with is ultimately develop an appreciation for classical music, which she loved. As a young boy, it didn't interest me, but over time, I got interested in it, and she helped guide me on that journey. Our mother wanted us to be healthy. She made us eat vegetables we could not stand. To this day, the sight of string beans makes me queasy. We never had butter in our house. We always had margarine. I don't know if that's actually good for you, but it doesn't taste good, I can tell you that. And then last night we were talking about this. Growing up, the only kind of seafood we ever had was whitefish burned to a crisp. And she also, as Barry was talking about last night, barbecue chicken burnt to a crisp. About this time, smoke detectors became very popular. And we knew we were having fish or chicken for dinner because the smoke detectors were going off before the smell actually got throughout the house. But she really wanted us to be healthy. I didn't really learn what seafood was until I went to college. She always had these good candies locked away. And I don't know if this candy place is still around, Fannie Mae. Some of you might remember that. She would always have Fannie Mae candy in these nice wooden bowls in our living room, but we couldn't eat it because it was for company. Not allowed to eat the company's candy. She always pushed me about my weight, so going to the doctor's office or clothes shopping was very unpleasant. And I think another thing that she struggled with is neither Neil or I were interested in fashion or buying clothes. We were little kids, she dressed us up very nicely, but as Neil and I got older, that just was not our thing. The next grim reality that she faced was when our grandmother died. Not only reading some of the stuff that my mother wrote, her mother was not only her mother, but was also her very close friend. She really used her as a sounding board. She was the cool mom that all the other kids that she grew up with wished their mom was like her mom. And I think our mother tried to be that for Neil and me. She watched our grandmother die of lung cancer, which is an excruciatingly painful death. But to cope with that, she had her husband, Jerry, to lean on, our father. I think she made peace with her mother before she died. I think there were some unresolved issues, but they made peace with each other. And she took lessons from her mother's life and death that she tried to incorporate into her own life. The obituary that you might have seen, our mother wrote that. Neil just read her words. She was a very organized person. She wanted to be in control in this situation. She wanted Neil and I to be well prepared for this day. Part of coping with grim reality, My mother, you might have heard, could be blunt on occasion. I don't know if any of you ever experienced that with her. You always knew where you stood with her. I think the politically correct way to say that is she did not suffer fools gladly. And she will always be brutally honest as the day is long. She was a loyal family member, friend, and would defend those who she cared about, but whatever you do, don't cross her. As was mentioned by the rabbi, my mother and father fought quite a bit throughout their marriage. It was like, what did you say? It was their dance? I think that's accurate. But the interesting thing is, she could say anything she wanted to about our father, but if anybody else said anything bad about him, watch out, she would be right in your face. She did not do that, did not handle that well. She also defended her children against teachers and other people who she thought treated us unfairly. She encouraged us to figure out how to solve our own problems, but if there was something that really bothered her, she would take action, and she had a long memory if someone had wronged her. So to give you an example of this, and this is really going back a long way, so when I was in kindergarten, I guess I was not a good kindergarten student, and my mother saved everything, so we actually found some of my old kindergarten report cards. Apparently I talked out of turn. I still do that today. Apparently my handwriting is bad. It's actually gotten worse. Thankfully we have computers now, so it matters less. And apparently the worst sin a kindergartner could commit is, I used too much paste. That will really affect your ability to get into the college of your choice if you'd use too much paste. But the thing that riled up my mother most about that kindergarten teacher is she told the first grade teacher, the teacher did, I don't think Mark can do first grade work. That really bothered my mother. And so around 20 years later, when I'd finished my PhD, when you do a PhD dissertation, you have it bound into a book. Most universities require that, and I had extra copies of it made. She said, do you have an extra one? And I said, sure, what do you want it for? And she said, I want to send it to your kindergarten teacher. I don't know whether she did that or not, but that was just the way she was. If a family member or a friend behaved in a way that she thought was wrong, she would call them out. She would say, I don't agree with that, and then get into their argument, but most of those relationships grew as a result of that, because of her honesty and her integrity. The next unexpected grim reality was our father's death. That one took all of us by surprise. My father was healthy. He was looking forward to retirement. He'd worked hard his whole life. Our parents had just bought a house in Florida because as warm and pleasant as Chicago winters can be, I hear it's nicer in Florida in the winter, and they wanted to get out of those Illinois winters. Given my mother's previous experiences with Florida, she didn't want to be there, but she went along with it. And what ended up happening with my father is he was riding his bike, he was hit by a truck, and he ended up dying later that day. Ironically, my mother was here at BJBE when it was happened. She was at choir practice, and Janet, who sings in the choir with my mother, actually said the rabbi pulled her out of the choir practice to tell her that her husband had just died. And that was completely unexpected, knocked us all for a loop, but our mother faced that grim reality with courage and strength. She planned the funeral, she planned the Shiva, and she tried to understand and take over the family finances, which up to that point my father had dealt with. As you might expect, she was in quite a fragile state for quite a while, and she had Neil and me to lean on to help her through that. Another thing that happened is she learned who her real friends were. Her real friends stuck by her long after this death. Other friends just sort of fell by the wayside. People she'd not seen in a while came out of the woodwork to be there and support her. So she learned about that grim reality. She didn't know what to do about the house in Florida, so she asked Neil and me what we thought we should do about it, and we basically said, you're not in a good emotional state right now, maybe just hang on to it and then we'll figure it out later. And then at the Shiva, somebody actually came to make a condolence call, and he was a realtor, and he asked her if she wanted to sell, which, I mean, maybe that's a Chicago thing, but we thought that was pretty weird. But she didn't sell, she kept it, and she showed even more courage and faced that grim reality by going down there as a single woman and making friends in Florida. She made many dear friends down in Florida, and she went down there every year until she got sick. She was down there, she was able to partake in golf, dining out, and culture. and she only finally reluctantly sold the place after she was diagnosed with cancer. It takes a lot of courage to face that grim reality, and our mother did it and was a great example. After my father died, she eventually decided to move on, and she enjoyed doing things, she enjoyed companionship, and so she was able to find companions who treated her with respect, shared her common interests, and was able to find happiness in the final years of her life. And I'll say more about that in a moment. The final grim reality she faced was cancer. And that's unfortunately why we're here today. Nearly 2 years ago, she was diagnosed with a pretty nasty form of cancer. She underwent very strenuous treatments that had horrible side effects. She was hospitalized, she had more procedures, and compassionate healthcare providers helped her navigate through that. For a good chunk of the time that she was dealing with this disease, she was fighting off very serious infections. And my mother would say, I'm weak, I can't handle this. And our cousin Evan, who's a medical doctor, actually said, you've fought off sepsis, which is a very serious infection, twice. You are a very strong woman. She did that. But unfortunately, the cancer kept coming back, and her body could no longer handle the side effects from all the treatments that she was facing. And as she was going through this journey, she faced the grim reality of imminent death. She helped Neil and me understand what she wanted done, how we needed to support her. She didn't try to sugarcoat anything. She faced it with sort of what I would call a steely resolve and helped us prepare for the inevitable. She helped us prepare for the grim reality of life without her. And this service today is actually the first step in living that grim reality. Now, so far, I've painted a somewhat negative picture. One cannot only live by grim reality without having joy in your life. And as Neil alluded to, my mother had many joyful experiences in her life, tempered with a sense of realism and always seasoned with 1 or 2 sprinkles of bluntness. She loved living in Madison while she went to college. She was a member of the Sigma Delta Tau sorority. She loved restaurants, parties, etc. From the wedding pictures, I wasn't alive when she was married, but that wedding looked like it was quite the bash. And I think that was joyful, but I think her real joy came later when Neil and I came into the world. She loved to share our accomplishments and our life milestones. She was very involved in our school activities. She celebrated our bar mitzvahs here at BJBE, proms, graduations, weddings, grandchildren, and career successes. So one example of a career success that I had the pleasure of experiencing with my mother, a few years ago, a former boss of mine who had since retired from the place where we worked, had since taken a faculty job at a university. And he asked me if I would come to his university and give a talk about some of the work that I was doing. And it happened that the school happened to be down in Florida. And so I said, sure, I'll do that. I came down there, I stayed with my mother. And the day before the talk, this person said, would you like to have your mother join you at your talk? I hadn't thought of that. I said, sure, that would be great. And so I went into this lecture hall, a room about the size of this one. My mother was sitting in the seat, and as soon as I started talking, you could see just the ear-to-ear grin, just how happy she was to see me doing what I do for a living, having never seen that before. And it was just a joyful experience to be able to do that. She was really happy with Neil and me, but I think we nudged the happiness meter to the next level when the grandchildren came along. Neil and I don't live in the Chicago area, so after Jenna and Hannah were born, our mother made the effort to come out to visit us every few weeks so that their grandchildren would know their grandmother. They would be able to interact with her. She loved visiting frequently. Since she had 2 boys that didn't care about fashion, she loved dressing up little girls. She played along with all the crazy things that grandkids like to do. Jenna was really into ladybugs, so my mother really got into ladybugs. I think her golf club covers are all ladybugs. We had this stuffed animal bulldog. Jenna decided we need to have a birthday party for him. So my mother, we baked a cake. We had a birthday party for Scampy. It was awesome. And other times my mother and my daughter would pretend to bake cakes over FaceTime calls. As Neil mentioned, our mother loved to see Jenna and Hannah dance, and she also loved to see Hannah sing. And every time Hannah was singing somewhere, I'd always get a URL to watch it on a live stream. It was absolutely beautiful. Every time she called us, she asked, how are Jenna and Hannah doing? She enjoyed celebrating Jenna and Hannah's life milestones just as she enjoyed celebrating with Neil and me. Unfortunately, grim reality returned again. She worried about Jenna and Hannah quite a bit. When Jenna was little, she was dealing with some serious medical issues. My mother really leaned on her religion to help her get through that, to lean on her faith to help her get through what was a really unpleasant situation. She also worried about some other things that maybe you wouldn't think she would worry about. One year, in late December, our family and Neil's family went to visit our mother down in her house in Florida. And John and Hannah, who both live in places that are cold in the winter, wanted to spend time in the pool. Like, they wanted to be in the pool the whole time. They ate all their meals in the pool. They never got out of the pool. And the pool is like surrounded by a lanai. And one night, they decided, we want to sleep under the stars tonight. But Nana said no. You want to know why Nana said no? Nana was afraid that an alligator would climb out of the pond near the lanai, chew through the lanai, and somehow eat her granddaughters. And so she forbade that. So he had to lower the hurricane shutters, so they really didn't get to sleep under the stars. But that's what she worried about. So after my mother died, after our father died, she dated some folks that, I won't use the words that she used since we're in a synagogue, so I'll just use placeholder words. She dated some people who were jerks and losers. And she was actually asking Neil and me for dating advice, which was kind of an interesting turn. Eventually, she dated a man named Preston, and they had several good years together before he died. After Preston died, my mother dated more jerks and losers, and eventually found Stuart. And for the last several years, they've had lots of fun together, golfing, traveling, playing cards, watching Seinfeld, and going out with friends. And when Mom got sick, Stuart stayed by her side, providing physical and emotional support within the limits of his own health. And at one point, my mother told me, she said to you, Stuart, you didn't sign up for this. You don't have to do any of this, but you stayed by her side no matter what. You stayed by her side as long as you're physically able to. And she loved you and appreciated that you did that for her. As was alluded to earlier, one of my mother's great joys was she liked getting dressed up, and she liked decorating. She really liked decorating. She lived in her house in Northbrook for 40 years. I think if you live in a house for 40 years, you can redecorate each room at least once. She probably did some rooms 2 or 3 times. That was her creative outlet, and it was probably a form of therapy for her. Now, as part of the decorating process, she gave her a style eye for other people. The first time she visited the first house I bought in New Jersey, she said, oh, this is a really great house. And after sleeping on it the next morning, she told Carol and me, well, your house has potential. And another perspective she brought to decorating is, if we had things on our kitchen counter, that was clutter. If she had things on her kitchen counter, that's art. So she had an interesting perspective on that. And sometimes, every once in a while, she might have picked style over comfort. And if you've ever been in my mother's house, there was a period of years where she had this purple couch. Apparently, it was a very expensive purple couch, very stylish, probably the most uncomfortable couch you ever sat on. And she couldn't admit she made a mistake, but eventually it found its way into the basement where all the dead couches go. She tried to sell it, no one would buy it. She tried to donate it, no one would take it. I think somebody finally picked it up. I think she actually tried to donate to BJB, and they said, no, thank you. But they did that. She also loved decorating her house in Florida, and she once told me, people came into her house and said, who decorated this place? She's like, I did. And they were really impressed. It was really something that she got joy in. Now, when Stuart moved in, he brought this recliner chair with him. And I think the most polite way to describe it would be, it did not align well with my mother's style sense. And she would occasionally tease him about it, and Stuart was always a good sport about the chair, but she always thought that chair was big and ugly, I believe were the words she used. Then she had cataract surgery. And then she looked, she said, oh my God, I didn't realize how big and ugly it was. Having said that, that chair was probably more comfortable than any other piece of furniture in her house. So that's the way it goes. Okay, if my mother were here, she's saying, you're going on too long, Mark, wrap it up. So 2 more things to cover. You might wonder about the cake recipe that's in the program. That's probably not something that are typically done in funeral programs, is that correct? No, this is a new thing. Okay. If you've ever invited my mother to a party, she might have made this bundt cake. very delicious bundt cake, very moist, very chewy. She would never give the recipe to anyone. As Neil alluded to, Hannah and Jenna really liked this bundt cake. She would not give either of them the recipe until either she died or they got married. So unfortunately, she died before they got married, but we actually got out of the safe a sealed envelope, one for Carol, one for Jenna, talking about the cake with the recipe. And of course, the first sentence in the letter that went with it is, if you're reading this letter now, that means I'm dead. So because we like scientific inquiry, we actually did an experiment last night. We tried to make one of these bundt cakes, and I can assure you that following the recipe, it came out exactly the way it would if my mother made it. So strongly encourage you to make one of these cakes. They really are delicious, but that was just something she cared about. She didn't like to cook chicken or fish, apparently. She did like to bake, and the thing she got great joy in baking was one of these cakes. And last night, we made the cake, and we just sat around the kitchen eating pieces of this cake, remembering my mother. So I'd like to end with one conversation I had with my mother. And this one's a little bit more serious than what I've been saying. One time, my mother and I were driving. I think we were coming back from the doctor's office. And once again, she was poking at me about my weight. And then the car was silent for a while. And then she just turns to me and asks the question as we're driving home, "Do you think I'm a good mother?" And I was maybe like 9 or 10 when she asked that question. I don't remember how I answered that question, but I'm sure I equivocated. I probably said something of the form of yes, but, which when someone says but, ignore everything after that. But I was really floored by the question. Now, having a lot more perspective and having been a parent myself, I perhaps have a different answer to that question. And the answer is yes. You were the best mother that Neil and I could have. You instilled in us confidence. You shaped us to be decent human beings, productive members of society, and to be good parents and to treat others with respect, but not let people take advantage of us. And now, as we face the grim reality of your passing, we will do our best to continue to live our lives in a way consistent with the values you instilled in us and cherish the memories we made with you. We love you.
Thank you both. It takes a special kind of person to write their own obituary, to draft words to be spoken at their own funeral. Someone self-aware and reflective, someone who speaks their mind with a strong sense of who they are. All of these things are true of Lana Segal, and perhaps these qualities are parts of why she planned this funeral so carefully. But the most important reason behind it all was her deep love for her sons, Neil and Mark. Neil and Mark, after experiencing the sudden death of your dad, Jerry, your mom didn't want you two to struggle in this time any more than absolutely necessary. And for all her humor and bluntness and big personality, this feels essential to who she was, a deeply devoted mother who looked out for her sons and tried to protect them until the very end. In that same obituary, we can read how Lana saw herself and how she wanted to be remembered. As a beloved wife and loving companion, a dear mother and mother-in-law, a proud nonna, a cousin, a daughter, a niece, a friend, Lana was a loyal person and filled her life with people and relationships that she cared about. As you shared with me yesterday, Lana was a deeply social creature. She loved to interact with people, and she wasn't wired for sitting alone. Perhaps that's part of what made Lana such an excellent employee at Neiman Marcus for 25 years. Her work there certainly drew upon her love of shopping, fashion, and style, but it was the relationships she built with her customers, including almost inexplicably many Bears players, that truly set her apart on the floor. From her decades of working there, Lana had the respect and loyalty of her customers who trusted her honesty, integrity, and phenomenal taste. Those are her words. Lana's style was core to who she was, her clothing, but also her home. From her mother, Estelle, she inherited a love of decorating, as Mark spoke about, and redecorated every room in her home. She was thrilled after raising two wonderful sons that she finally had granddaughters to dote on. She was a girl's girl, and while she didn't necessarily share a fashion sense with you two, she was so excited to shop for you and buy you dolls for every birthday. Lana was committed to being around for you guys. Even though Mark and Carol lived in New Jersey, Jenna, when you were born, Lana made sure to visit every 6 to 8 weeks. As you told me yesterday, she loved her grandkids above all else. Family and community were so important to Lana, though it wasn't always a smooth road, as you both spoke about. Born in Chicago in November 1940, Lana was the daughter of Estelle and Howard. Her biological father, Howard, died when she was just a year and a half old, and when Estelle married Edward, he eventually adopted her. Lana found community at Greenwoods Camp, which her mom sent her to when she was 7 years old, and she found family in Jerry Segal, whom she met while they were both in Madison, attending the University of Wisconsin. Lana studied English and drama. She loved college and her STT sorority, and when Jerry graduated, they moved back to Chicago to start their lives together while she finished her degree at Roosevelt. Soon after, the young couple moved to Niles to raise Mark and Neil. While you two were growing up, as you said, there was always a piano in the house, and she passed the time while waiting for you boys by playing. It was important to her to send you two to summer camp, even as Jerry disagreed. She knew how it had instilled self-confidence and independence in her, and she wanted the same for you two, and later for her granddaughters as well. She and Jerry had a loyal, honest, and good marriage, sometimes characterized by that nonsense and sniping that you spoke about, but always grounded in love. When Jerry died suddenly, Lana's world was rocked. And yet, Lana was an incredibly resilient woman. She and Jerry had recently purchased their home in Florida, and Lana bravely went down on her own without him, managing to make friends and building a community for herself. She dated and found love again, and the end of her life was made that much better by her last 4 years partnered with Stuart. She modeled resilience, self-sufficiency, and responsibility, traits that she's passed down to all of you. There were serious times in Lana's life, and she took her role as wife and mother seriously. But you all also told me how funny and irreverent Lana was. She was a great storyteller, fun at parties, and never one to keep her keen and sometimes blunt observations to herself. It was one of her most endearing qualities. Lana was, in your words, a hoot, but in addition to her excellent sense of humor, she was also funny because of her capacity to laugh at herself. Lana was incredibly self-reflective, and for all her brashness, she could also acknowledge her mistakes and admit when she was wrong. It's impossible for me to speak about Lana here on the BJBE Bema without reflecting on her decades of participation in the BJBE choir. I only got to know Lana briefly in my time here, but one of the first things I learned about her was her commitment to the choir. That was an anchor for her at BJBE, and it helped make this place a home for her. Despite not being raised religiously, she found connection here at synagogue. A trip to Israel with Rabbi Shapiro in the early 80s ignited something in her, inspiring her to become an adult bat mitzvah in 1986 at age 46. Her love of music and love of this community made joining the choir a natural fit. And for decades, 40 to 50 years, we don't know, she sang for us multiple services a day throughout all the high holidays, even as she got older and the already long days were increasingly exhausting and demanding. It was important to her to be there. Just last month, Lana made a donation to the Singer Music Fund at BJBE. Even as her health was failing, she wanted to support the musical community that was so precious to her. Our synagogue is lucky to have had her in our choir and in our community for as long as we did. Our lives will all be enriched if we can live as Lana lived, if we can be funny and resilient, strong and independent, if we can treasure our family and be silly and laugh hard, even at ourselves, If we bring these qualities forward into our own lives, then Lana's memory, as Judaism teaches, will truly be for a blessing. We offer gratitude for having been on life's journey with Lana, and we pray for her protection as this end of her life has arrived. We read words of El Male Rachamim, our memorial prayer. I'll invite you to please rise. I'll chant this prayer in English and we can read together. And I'll chant this prayer in Hebrew and we can read together the English afterward. El Male Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hansei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia, Mazirim, Et Nishmat Yakiratenu, Shehalcha Leolama, Bal Harakamim, Yastireha Beseter Kanafav Leolamim, Veyitzror Bitzror Hachayim Et Nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar amen. Let's read together. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellst on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Lana Segal, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring her under the cover of thy wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may her repose be peace. Amen.
Friends, this does conclude the service here in the sanctuary. Term will take place immediately at the family plot at Shalom Memorial Park, 1700 Rand Road, just in Arlington Heights. Due to an abundance of caution, and obviously we're aware of the frigid cold outside, the family is going to do a private interment at Shalom. However, upon return from the cemetery, Shiva will be at the Segal residence, 4506 Lindenwood Lane in Northbrook, immediately following the interment until 9 this evening. Memorial contributions in Lana's memory can be made to Cancer Wellness Center. That information is on the funeral home website. If you did not receive one on the way in, they are available on the way out. And for those who are watching our service on the website, that information is there online as well. The following individuals have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your names, if you could please rise and stand near Lana's casket. Alan Cohn, Evan Lipkis, Fred Chaimson, David Russ, Jenna Segal, and Hannah Segal. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone if we could please rise as we sort the casket, the family, and the rabbi from the sanctuary. So, pallbearers, we're going to walk 2 by 2 just till we get out of the chapel.